with this, we move on to the next panel discussion, which is on the subject of innovations. And we are joined by a galaxy of innovationists, as I may call it. Each and every one has worked incessantly in their own respective areas. So let's have the good news first, exactly the way when we started the panel, the last panel discussion as to, India improving its rankings on the ease of doing business. India made it to the coveted list of top 50 innovative countries for the first time in 2020, ranking 48th among 131 countries on Global Innovation Index. Indeed, something to hear about. Further, India also ranked 45th and 57th on the innovation output and innovation input sub-indices, respectively. Now, not so good news. The country appears to be underperforming in innovation with respect to the size of its GDP. It is to be treated as a warning against being complacent. The big question mark is, are we? So there are certain hurdles to it, which we need to overcome. In order to make it, we require boost in our gross expenditure on R&D, which currently is 0.7% of GDP, to go over 2%. It also involves significantly scaling up R&D personnel and researchers in the country, especially in the private sector. No denying the fact that the macroeconomic impact of innovations on pushing productivity and competitiveness will always be there. The role of government is to invest in science. The investment has to go up, incentivize, and to create necessary infrastructure for absorption and also to build capacity. So interdependence, knowledge transfer, sustained investment become critical to innovations. And this is exactly what our panel today is going to discuss. We have divided it over 3 different areas: that skills and infrastructure on which the innovation relies needs investment. So how do we achieve better coordination for desired results? Number 2, innovation is becoming more international. How do we build on national policies to draw on ideas and best practices so that it does not develop in a vacuum? And more importantly, how to take these innovations to the market? Everyone knows that India has had absolutely brilliant track record of having created innovations. But unfortunately, most of these innovations sit in the labs for 2 reasons. A, we write patents and then we hold them close to our chest. Or otherwise, there are no takers in the market for it being priced at such a level wherein no one wants to take a chance. So, put together along with the ease of doing business and the potential for this to also create jobs in the scientific and in the science and innovation sector, all this has to come together. So what I am going to do is we will invite our panelists one by one and also throw these 3 questions one by one. So we will have everyone express their opinion on the question number 1, which is how to improve skills and infrastructure based on investments. What kind of innovations that require investment and can be achieved with better coordination for the results to be acceptable to the society, acceptable to the industry, acceptable to the market. And with this, I have the pleasure of inviting Mr. Chandru Van Som, who is Additional Chief Secretary, Sports, Youth and Cultural Activities Department, Government of Gujarat. He was earlier Principal Secretary, General Administration, and took over as Principal Secretary of Sports before elevating to the position of ACS. Now you will wonder that what sports have got to do with science and innovations, but there is always a science behind even sports. A very small intervention, which probably was the brainchild of the ACS of having to take sports online. How did this happen? I mean, without track and field, how can sports be taken online? So this was one big innovation, and it has given desired results. So what I'm trying to say is that innovation is not limited to laboratories only. They can also be there in the field. So with this, I hand over to Dr. Hanif Qureshi, who is Director General, New and Renewable Energy Department, Haryana, and HAREDA, which is Haryana Renewable Energy Development Agency. He's an academic, researcher, and a TEDx speaker with vast experience of policing, comprising criminal investigations, traffic, intelligence operations, training, and handling law and order situations. He was SP of 8 districts and IGP of 2 ranges. His research interests are police legitimacy, crimes against women, organizational citizenship behaviors, criminal justice system reforms, and related issues. But yes, renewable energy has not figured anywhere in his profile. That means to say, again, it's not limited by what you do. So the world is open. The world of innovation is open in front of us. With this, I invite Dr. Qureshi.
Thank you, Dr. Gurdarshan.
Gursharan.
You have correctly pointed out that I recently joined the field of renewable energy. It was about 1.5 years ago. And it has been very fascinating to see how the skills and how the programs which we roll out are similar in policing as well as in renewable energy fields. Now, when we talk of innovation, I think ideas alone are not enough. So we have a lot of innovative ideas, but the problem is how to put those innovations into a working project and get them accepted by the people and get them accepted by everybody. So, for instance, in the renewable energy field, we found that the Haryana is a agriculture intensive state and a lot of people are there in agriculture, and the problem of power which is there, that forces farmers to use diesel gensets. Especially in the NCR region, they are using a lot of diesel gensets. So it has a disadvantage of spreading pollution as well as it is very costly for the farmers. Now, when the Government of India introduced the Prime Minister Kusum scheme, which is the solarization of these agricultural pumps, so this idea was that we will save on the pollution, we will give clean energy, but the resistance in the farmers was there. They are, given our political setup, the farmers are getting free electricity. So they do not want that even 25, because Government of India said that we will give 30% subsidy in the cost, and state government said we will give 45% subsidy, which means only 25% of the cost was to be given by farmers. But they were also not ready for that because they were getting free electricity. So the problem which our Department of Renewable Energy faced was that how to sell this idea to farmers that this is good for you. So we used a lot of tricks in the book. We said that, okay, you are getting 8 hours of power maybe in the night. You have to get up in the night. Now you will be getting 10 hours of power in the daytime. You don't have to spoil your nighttime sleep. In the day, power will be there and you can tend to your fields. So one thing was winning over the farmers and getting them to accept that solar energy is good for agriculture. But the second problem was the tying up with a number of agencies. So in Government of India, we had the Energy Efficiency Services Limited, ESL, which was doing the tendering. We also had the NABARD, which was giving a part of the financing. There is also the state government agencies, and there is also the banks through which the financial system is flowing. So I think when we want to put the innovations on ground, we have to look at probably 8 to 10 stakeholders, some in the government, some in the private firms who are manufacturing various components. Not one firm is manufacturing every component. So number of firms, number of agencies in the central government, number of agencies in the state government, and this coordination which has to be done. I think this requires us to be flexible. This requires us to respect the other's viewpoint. I may be sold out on one thing, but what do the others think? So this spirit of understanding of each other's problems and then thinking about a common goal. We are working for India. India has given a commitment in the Paris Convention that we will reduce our carbon footprint. That's a national goal. We are achieving towards that. And we have integrated it with farmers. You will save money. You will get clean energy. So I think once we understand each other, that's an enabling factor. And very rightly you said, given the size of our country, the size of our economy, the size of our agriculture, it requires massive funding. And the central government, I'm very happy to say that they contributed this 30%, which is a huge chunk. And the state government contributed also a huge chunk, 45%. And also these farmers, which were convinced, they also contributed 25%. So when this big burden was shared between these three major stakeholders, I think the problem of finance was also solved. So that is how we not only achieved the first year targets. Haryana is one of the first states in the country which has implemented and achieved the targets which were given to us for solarization of agriculture. And encouraged by this, now we have increased our targets in the next year. Haryana is spending 7,000 crore rupees every year in agricultural subsidies. And that money is going out of the taxpayers' money. If we continue this program, in the next 5 to 6 years, our agricultural subsidies can come down from 7,000 to less than 1,000 crores. How much of money is saved for everyone and how much of environment is saved? So if these benefits are brought before all the stakeholders, I think there is a common commitment that all of us should work for it. So I think those are my thoughts on innovation and how to, really put it on ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saab. We are joined by Mr. Som. So my question was that innovation relies on skills and infrastructure that need investments. And how can we achieve better coordination for desired results? You have done some really great work, not in the scientific field, but innovation doesn't belong only to the laboratories. It can be anywhere. But particularly around the issue of achieving better coordination for results, that how skills and infrastructure and investments need to go hand in hand.
Thank you very much. And first of all, I would like to thank the SKOCH committee for giving me this opportunity of speaking on this webinar. And I'm a science student myself. I've studied from IIT Delhi. I've also worked during my stint in the IAS in the employment and training. So skill is also something I know. So therefore, I think I'll be able to throw some light on these issues. But before that, I would like to start by defining the relationship between discovery, invention, and innovation by Abdul Kalam, while he said these things when he was speaking at IIT Delhi once. And this is very important for us to have this clarity. Discovery relates to finding new laws, principles, and concepts. For example, the Raman effect, Einstein's theory of relativity, and the laser. Invention is about evolving new systems using the discovery. For example, Manilal Bhaumik, an Indian-American scientist whose invention of excimer laser has been very useful. Graham Bell's telephone, Thomas Edison's electric bulb, internet and television. What is innovation? Innovation is the change that creates a new dimension to perform and enables that practical use of an invention for a larger public good. For example, use of Manilal Bhaumik's laser for eye surgery, which benefited a huge number of people in India and all over the world. Mobile telephone itself and its various applications, and the quite recent ones, making payments using internet to deliver the television. Now, in India, what I saw is we are able to do a lot of innovations, but are we backing it up with skill development to sustain that innovation? That is one of the most important things which comes to my mind. Believe me, I have seen the Indian Industrial Training Institutes working, which is called ITIs in the States. And whenever I used to go for a conference in Delhi and things like that, I used to see that most of the states, during that time at least, I'm talking about 2005 to 2009, it was a subject which was not taken very, very seriously. But we need to take the skill development and at that level of the technicians very, very seriously. The reason is the innovations can be sustained by the skills. So not only investment, but the skills are equally important. And I'll give you a very interesting example that when I was talking to General Motors, which is in Gujarat, and they were recruiting a lot of people, they said ki, see, 95% of the people who are recruited at the ITI level. And India, if you look at it, our doctors are as good as, any international doctors. Our engineers are as good as, any of the engineers of the international level. However, if you look at our technicians who are supposed to sustain this innovation, I'm sorry to say they are not at the level of a German technician or an American technician or a British technician. So therefore, what we need, I think, is a massive investment at this ground level, grassroots level institutes, which are called the Industrial Training Institutes, to sustain the innovations. Secondly, it's a pyramid we have to understand. Even the Tata Motors, when they came to Gujarat for manufacturing the Tata Nano, was very closely involved with them while, they were recruiting. And even today, of course, there has been a lot of restructuring in that company, but most of the people they were recruiting were at the technician level who were ITI pass or 12th pass and things like that. My point is, we need to understand that it's a pyramid kind of a structure where we need a lot of people very well trained at their bottom, and then we go up. In fact, what has happened is we are having an inverted pyramid now. You'll see a lot of engineers. I'm so sorry to say that it's so easy to get a PhD. But then what? What kind of skill are we giving to these people who are, within inverted commas, within our system, are highly qualified? Then you find that they are not able to find even a job in the banks. I was so astonished to know there were so many people who have done their BTech in electronics, BTech in mechanical engineering. They are applying for the job of clerks. Even I came across a person who is working in State Bank and he's a PhD and he's working as a clerk. My point is, are we looking at this structure of the pyramid properly? Are we making arrangements so that we have enough number of people where we need? And are we coming out with people with skills, or we are coming out with people who only have certificates to show? Are we giving them only certificates, or are we giving them skills? Because I think the difference, when I studied the German system, Swiss system, Australian system, and the Commonwealth, other countries' systems as well, European systems, the emphasis is not on the certificates, not on the degrees. The emphasis is always on the skill. So, and therefore, you will find whenever an innovation takes place in any country, it is backed up by a very strong team of people who understand the innovation, who are able to sustain the innovation. And therefore, what we need to do is to we have a lot of incubators coming, a lot of institutes coming who are encouraging innovations. Very good. I really applaud them. But then I think we need to reach each and every ITI, the Industrial Training Institutes, because they are in the talukas, they are in the blocks. And here is the majority of the people who come out, the technicians and all who come out. And they, even in the medical field also, if I may say so, that you will come at lot of places, at least I can tell you about 10 years back, when the CT scan machines came to civil hospitals, I have been there in quite a few of them and seen, they were just in one room, may not be now. And because there were no technicians to handle it. So in the medical field also, it is equally important. You can have the best of the X-ray machines, and it is very relevant for this pandemic. Now, just add one thing. What we have done in our project on mobile to sports is, it's a very small innovation, you can say, but it can have a major effect. What mobile to sports has done is, we have used the platform of Facebook and YouTube. And using that, we are encouraging people to spend more time on sports and less time on mobile. And of course, we started with our coaches, our trainers, and our sports persons. And we are also going to public. And as a result, it has got a response from 8.5 lakh people now, till now. And why it is necessary now during this pandemic? Because as you know, for keeping up, sustain your immunity, it is very, very important to do the physical exercises. And what we are telling people through a concept called play at home is, you can play most of the games, or at least some of the games, at home, even if you are living in a flat. You can do your yoga, you can do any other physical activities, keep yourself fit and fight the coronavirus. Therefore, it has become very, very important now, this launching of the mobile to sports. At the same time, sports person can keep themselves fit, and when the competition starts, they can participate in these competitions and remain fit. And of course, remaining fit is very important for all of us. So through mobile to sports, what we are trying to send a message is, build a healthy population in a healthy nation. I would like to end by saying that every innovation should be such that it can be replicated in any state and any country. And that is the concept of mobile to sports. This concept can be taken over free of cost by any state in India, any country in the world. And I'm happy to state that more than 60 countries have responded, and they are actually, using our concept at this point in time, as we can see. And we are going to expand it. We'll request all the states who are hearing us today to adopt this concept of mobile to sports. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And in fact, some of the points that you made about the qualifications and the kind of innovations and the impediments that have been there. So let me invite a principal scientist from CSIR Lab, Central Road Research Institute, Mr. Satish Pandey, who has been with the CRRI since 2006 and has also been an academic, been assistant professor at the Academy of Scientific and Innovative Research. He had a brief stint with the industry, which is ACC Cement to start with, as a technical consultant at the beginning of his career. And he's an MTech from the Indian Institute of Technology in Transportation Engineering. So over to you, Mr. Pandey. My question remains, which is, innovation relies on skills and infrastructure that need investments. How can we achieve better coordination for desired results?
Thank you very much, Dr. Gursan, for warm introduction, and very good afternoon to all the esteemed panelists and jury members. So today, a very pertinent questions is posed by the Scotch jury and the panelists, like how the innovation can be strengthened through the investment and the infrastructure boost up. And in this regard, the public-private partnership can play a vital role. And once again, I'm here sharing one of the success story on which the CSIR Central Road Research Institute recently worked upon. And as per the Government of India flagship program From Waste to Wealth, we have developed the technology to utilize the industrial solid waste material generated in Tata Steel Jamshedpur to utilize as a substitute of natural aggregate in road construction work. So the Tata Steel operates India's largest steel plant with annual production capacity of 10 million ton per annum at Jamshedpur, which produce around 3.5 to 4 million ton steel slag every year. This quantity of slag is largely considered as an industrial waste, and it is dumped as a stockpile which consumes huge amount of land and poses significant environmental and technical challenges to the industry as well as to the concerned city also. So in this regard, what can we do in this particular arena? So Steel Jamshedpur approached the CSIR Central Road Research Institute, and we have successfully worked together to develop the technology to convert this slag waste material as a substitute of natural aggregate in road construction work. And this technology has been successfully transferred from lab to field, and we have constructed National Highway 33 NH33 passing from Ranchi to Jamshedpur using this alternate aggregate. And this particular material has been utilized from top to bottom in all layers of bituminous pavement. So as per the Construction Industry Development Council estimate, around 1.2 billion ton aggregate utilized annually in India in road construction activity. This huge consumption causes serious topographical changes, and by virtue of that, in many areas, particularly in Haryana, Rajasthan, and even in Jharkhand too, the mining activity is banned since it is causing seriously environmental imbalance. And this particular aggregate can be utilized in place of natural aggregate in construction work. So, keeping in view of this achievement, the Niti Aayog, Dr. V.K. Saraswat, the Honorable Member Niti Aayog, has recently funded a major research project to CSI Central Road Research Institute to develop the design guideline and specification for utilization of steel slag as a road aggregate in road construction work. And we are right now partnering with the four major steel industries in India, which comprises JSW Steel, Rashtriya Ispat Nigam Limited, ArcelorMittal and Nippon Steel, to utilize this huge quantity of slag in road construction work. So as per the Ministry of Steel estimate, around 18 million ton steel slag generated annually in India. So if this huge quantity of slag can be converted as a road aggregate, then not only we can significantly reduce the consumption of natural aggregate, besides that, we can also improve the quality of infrastructure in terms of its durability and service life. So this particular technology has its time tested experience. We started this project in the mid of 2014 with the laboratory study, and subsequently we laid a road on NS33 in 2016, and we continuously monitored it for 3 to 4 years on different performance parameters, since a road is a kind of infrastructure which is considered which is expected to serve at least 5 to 6 year span of time before any kind of overlay on top of it. So therefore we monitored it continuously for 4 to 5 years, and that it is a time tested technology. And after that, the Tata Steel has successfully branded this material as a Tata Agrito, and now they are commercially selling it at a 50% cost of natural aggregate in Jharkhand and surrounding areas. So keeping in view of this particular achievement, the Indian Road Congress has prepared a national specification, Indian Road Congress IRCSP 121, for the utilization of steel slag aggregate in rural roads. And after the advent of this specification in various PMGSY programs in Jharkhand, as well as in West Bengal, the processed steel slag aggregate has been used in place of natural aggregate. The majority of challenges which is associated with the slag utilization is its vesicular structure, volumetric expansion, and high specific gravity. So this material cannot be utilized directly as a substitute of construction material. But with the advent of technology which has been developed by CRRI and successfully implemented by Tata Steel in Jamshedpur plant, this industrial waste material has been successfully converted as a road construction aggregate, and now it is available to different road user agencies to utilize it at 50% cost of the natural aggregate. The another important achievement out of this particular project is that with the use of this particular aggregate, we can even reduce the thickness of road by 30 to 40%. So it basically prompt the road user agency to even transport this material at far distance despite having higher logistic cost. So this is one of the area like which has a successful public-private partnership mode to improve the infrastructure innovation. And recently, the government of India has taken up this particular project along with Ministry of Steel and funded a very large research project to CRRI, where the 60% R&D cost is going to borne by the industry itself. So in this particular project, National Highway Authority of India, Indian Road Congress, and National Rural Road Development Authority (NRRDA) are the stakeholders, and we are constructing another road on NH03 connecting Surat to Hazira using processed steel slag of ArcelorMittal and Nippon Steel plant. And hopefully by the end of this year, the full-fledged specification for the use of slag in place of natural aggregate will be published by the Ministry of Road Transport and Highway based upon the study conducted by CRRI, and invariably this material will be utilized in place of natural aggregate for road construction work. So that's all.
Excellent. An amazing feat, quite a remarkable achievement on such an innovation which has already uh, kind of scaled and made it to the market. My basic question here to you would be: did you approach Tata Steel or vice versa?
Sir, it's a vice versa. Tata Steel approached us. So I did one project for one international organization, Multiserve, which processed Arcelor slag in Europe. So based upon that study, Tata Steel got the information about it and they approached us.
So
And
they,
then,
so they brought in the resources and CRRI worked on it, and finally the project scaled.
yes,
So our basic submission that investments are something which are lagging as far as the innovations are concerned.
yes.
That really needs to go up, and our focus on R&D, because if we can do one project, if I may ask you once again, uh, you would have done scores of projects. How many of your projects actually scaled to this level?
In this regards, the Central Road Research Institute is a bit fortunate enough. Like we have around 7 to 8 projects which has successfully transferred at ground level and successfully implemented in different states. Recently, we have conducted a study to utilize the 60 to 70% reclaimed asphalt pavement material in road construction. I think all of you might have seen in every 4 to 5 years a bituminous overlay is provided on top of worn out roads. So this overlay is largely
That I remember, there was also another project of converting plastic into a material to be constructed, to be used in construction of roads in
yes,
Leh, between the city and the Stoke village, that which has already been done. It's been 2 years, so I'm aware of those. But the point is that in case there is no private sector push to it, our innovations, our efforts, our research will stay within the confines of the few walls. So that's a conclusion, which can easily be drawn from here, because you are coming from the scientific field, and what we heard before was from the implementation perspective, from the perspective that Mr. Som gave from Gujarat.
yes.
So somewhere there is only skills required, somewhere there is skill plus investments, both are required. and at the same time sustenance of the project has to come in for it to scale and become and have a wider implement much. And in fact, I'm tempted to ask you another question, which I will reserve for our next round. In between, let me move over to Dr. Parvati Devi, Superintendent from Government Ayurveda Research Institute of Mental Disease. Something very unique when we talk about Ayurveda, and that too for mental disease. Some absolutely phenomenal work that has been done there. So in 2010, she had taken over as superintendent and has been guiding research ever since. And research interests include child psychiatry, amongst others, and she's an accomplished author who has written extensively on areas of mental disease and has contributed extensively to Ayurveda research, being a Bachelor of Ayurvedic Medicine and Surgery and also a Master of Science in Psychology. A fantastic combination. Over to you, Dr. Devi.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for inviting me in this webinar and to tell about our Susmatam project. I think I'm supposed to talk about the problems faced in this project. Is it? I'm not clear the question to me.
My question, not really about your project. Project happens to be one success. But when we talk about innovations,
okay,
it relies on skills and infrastructure that need investments. And along with that, once the innovation is done, how to take these investments, these innovations to market.
I think in general subject, I'm not able to talk more about. Yeah, in the specific area of Ayurveda and especially in psychiatry. In Ayurveda, I think lots of innovations are going. Many people are starting some projects, and I think they are not much focused on a research. All are doing many innovative projects are there, but the documentation and the proper following up is not there. They are starting many institutions, and then tourism, they are making their own money, and they are based they are very much focused on tourism. Everything is there, but a real treatment, it's very difficult to find, or a general or a layman, it's very difficult to differentiate between the proper scientific Ayurvedic treatment and what is the fake or the tourism-based treatment. In many of the tourist places and many of the places, there are lots of Ayurvedic centers, but we can know that in many of the centers, or almost 80% of the centers, they are not doing proper Ayurvedic management. They are just doing something, or just doing some relaxation or something in the name of Ayurveda. But if it is a proper Ayurvedic center or a proper Ayurvedic innovations, it will be very beneficial to the society, and it's very effective treatment. But nowadays the problem is that I told you that it's very difficult to differentiate between many fake practitioners, and many fake centers are going on, and in Ayurveda, then first thing is this type of practices. And in other many institutions, the researches are not going on properly, and always we are going through or going in the manner of or in the style of the modern medicine. But a separate Ayurvedic research methodology is there, and we have to undergo this methodology. We have to follow this methodology, and if a proper research on Ayurveda, nowadays in the present government, they are giving much support to the government to Ayurveda, and it's a good news to hear that yesterday they have accepted Ayurvedic treatment is effective in COVID situation also. In mild to moderate symptoms of COVID, Ayurvedic treatment is effective. These are very good future steps of Ayurveda. And if a proper Ayurvedic treatment center or whatever it may be, if they are going follow correct research pattern and follow strict scientific base of Ayurveda, then one can achieve a lot with Ayurveda itself. If they are believing in Ayurveda or they are strictly based on Ayurveda, they can do a lot to the society. And according to the in Ayurveda, psychiatry is a main psychiatry is a branch of Ayurveda, but it is not explored. The chances or the this effect of Ayurvedic psychiatry is a least explored area in Ayurveda. Ayurvedic psychiatry can do a lot, and that is the most the thing is that there is no Ayurvedic psychiatric center in private sector in all over India. There is no. I don't know whether any small centers are there. Some practitioners are doing that, but a good hospital is not there. That Ayurvedic psychiatric center is not there. And this Ayurvedic then according to this Ayurvedic principles, if we do treatment, we can improve their quality of life. We can improve. There is not much side effects and no much extra pyramidal symptoms that giddiness like that extra or side effects of the other medical system. It's not there in Ayurveda, and Ayurveda can do more in the mainly in psychiatry, but I think a social stigma is there always. People are not much approaching to the practitioners of psychiatry always, even though it's in 21st century. Then also the stigma. If a man is mentally ill, they are hesitate to go to a psychiatrist. That type of we cannot practice much compared to the other general practitioners, but Ayurveda psychiatry is the least explored area in psychiatry. And if we can do more or some initiations are coming to this Ayurvedic sector, especially in Ayurvedic psychiatry, they can do a lot. But unfortunately, it's not there. No.
No, it will happen because we've seen over a period of time as to how Ayurveda is being mainstreamed, thanks to all kind of Ayurvedic research institutes and even the companies which have been set up. It's kind of getting a boost, and people are getting drawn to Ayurveda. May not be for treatment, but for prevention, because this is a traditional practice. Even during COVID, it is said in order to boost immunity, you should take Ayurvedic medicines. And now, as you're saying, that you also have developed, a treatment for COVID in Ayurveda. So it's a great achievement. But yes, it remains to be seen as to how fast we go to the market and make it commercial. Because you can do the research, and then finally there has to be a taker to take this innovation to the market. Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. And with this, I invite Joint Director, Center for Development of Advanced Computing, Mr. Amitav Akuli, who is a Master's in Computer Science and Engineering from the West Bengal University of Technology. He has been researching on sensing systems, process instrumentation, data analysis, and research projects, including quality estimation of rice, color characterization of silk yarn, conveyorized vision, West Bengal University of Technology. He has been researching on sensing systems, process instrumentation, data analysis, and research projects, including quality estimation of rice, color characterization of silk yarn, conveyorized vision inspection unit of quality analysis of chili. And he has published over 25 research papers in refereed journals. Mr. Amitav Akuli.
Good afternoon to all of you. Thank you, Guru Sharanji, for inviting me in this panel. And you correctly said that today's concept of discussion at the beginning, that the identifying challenges and role of government to the innovation process. And you pointed out correctly 3 points, that is how to generate skilling manpower to meet the requirement of innovations. And second one, what type of innovations to be funded by government. And third one is funding opportunity. So these are the three prime requirements you rightly pointed out. And based on that, mainly I'll tell about the main challenges, and I'll tell out some way out what government is doing in this line. So before going to start this topic, let me tell about this two meaning of these two homophones, that invention and innovation. Though often use these words invention and innovation as synonyms for one another, but they are technically different. And Chandrabhanu Som sir has already pointed out the differences, correctly pointed out. Basically, the invention occurs when we creating a completely new idea or introduce a process for the first time, while the innovation is improving upon an existing idea or adding value to the already existing process. So these are the main two differences. So the process is little bit different. The invention process involves the generation of idea and conceptualization, followed by implementation of proof of concept demonstration. And finally, documentation means patent filing or documentation for technology transfer and all those things. And innovations comes after invention, and it starts with exploring the market and the commercialization of invention, identifying the customer needs, analysis market trends or market survey, then product deployment, field of trial testing, feedback collection, and product refinement. It's a continuous evolving process. But the similar in two process is also the both process require financial support. Now, what are the current challenges? I would like to tell about the challenges and some way out, how to overcome these challenges. First, the weak linkages between stakeholders. The linkage between industry, especially medium, small scale industries, and R&D, research and development organization, the academic institutes are weak. There is no easy exchange of manpower, or no policy exists between manpower exchange between the industries and the academia and R&D institutes, which limits the capacity for mutual understanding and transfer of technology. So what the remedy? We should encourage the professors to go to industry and learn the problem from industry and go back and do some research work. Second one, introducing incentive scheme. We don't have any incentive schemes right away. The professors or the developers or researchers should be get some benefit when they are transferring the technology, when they have developed product, and the taking the product from lab to field is very difficult process. They should have been give some incentive for their work. Third one, giving advantage during the promotion policies or some kind of financial support needs to be done for doing this type of good research. Second one is lack of financial support from government or private organization for pursuing research and experimentation, for taking the product. So the main problem is that a lack of financial support from government or private organization for pursuing continual research or experimentation, for taking a product from lab to field. Basically, the industry requires a proven technologies, but the institutes or research organization can only offer technologies at considerably earlier stages. We called is mostly a laboratory or pilot scale product, meaning there is still much work to be done to bring the technologies to the market. So there is required for industry participation to take the product at early stage and do some further research to take the complete product to the market, or it should be a marketable product. Said the requirement is for the industry to take it from the institutes and do a marketing. Third one, inadequate protection of intellectual property rights. All the researchers in India are afraid of that one, because in India, the cost of patent applications and filing a patent is not only time consuming, but also costly. Innovators do not generally seek protection for their intellectual property unless forced for patent, for the patent. And the literacy of patent is also very low. Even among the educated inventors, the lack of expert help for writing the patent is another criteria for that. Fourth one, difficult and lengthy funding procedure. As all the researchers are aware of that one. The funding is available from government, public sector is also, but the procedure for accessing such funding are often complex, cumbersome, lengthy. Moreover, despite these difficult and lengthy procedures, the system seeks immediate return. However, the returns from innovations are often uncertain, late, or not quantifiable immediately. Fifth one, poor infrastructure facilities in villages. We have infrastructure facilities. Government has created a number of universities, infrastructure facilities in the urban areas. But in rural areas, lack of laboratory equipments, lack of high-speed internet availability, computing infrastructure, even the ability of skilled workforce are not evenly distributed. The infrastructure is not distributed over the remote villages across the India. So in most of the cases, the inventors and entrepreneurs must travel a long distance at their own expenses to receive mentorship or other support. Sixth one is innovation not always fulfilling the requirement of the industries. It's always true. Typically, a technology developed by research organization is ranging from the technology readiness level, TRL level, till 1 to 5. Means it's an early stage of innovations, though basic research, but the industry only picks up takes the product. It's a complete product when it should cross the TRL level more than 8 or at the 9. Hence, it's responsible by the industry to take the potentially marketable product at early stage and go for further research in the industry to make it marketable. And finally, among the entrepreneurs. In Indian, entrepreneurs often seek established technology as a basis of starting their business. They are hesitant to take the innovative ideas because of risk involved, cost of investment, time consuming to take the product from lab to the market. And it took Indian, basically the entrepreneurs take a minimum risk and they want quick returns. The potentially higher returns from the innovations take time to realize, and the entrepreneurs are not willing to accept this risk. So these are the challenges that Indian innovations is facilitating. But I surely tell that Indian gross expenditure on R&D, GERD, nearly tripled from 39,000 crores in the year 2007 to 2008 to 1,23,000 crore in the year 2018-19. And in budget 2020, around 718 crores is allocated under research and development for international cooperation, national mission for nanotechnology development, mega facilities of basic research, and other areas. 1,580 crores for human resource development and biotechnology, bioinformatics related work has been funded, and 815 crores has been distributed among the 16 autonomous bodies under the biotechnological development. But as Guru Sharanji told at the beginning of this seminar, that it was considered the percentage of GDP, that is India's GERD, is about only 0.7%, much lower than the target of 2%. However, in 2021 and 2022, it's widely believed that the government will press the pause button on funding research because of COVID-19. With that, I'd like to stop here. Thank you, Gurusanji and Scotch team for giving me opportunity
So
to
much
speak.
for speaking your heart out. It's truth, truth, and truth. You have also answered my third question as to how to take these innovations to market, and it's always true that in the face of lack of investments and the resources, it's not that the scientists lack the talent. They keep on working and they keep on writing patents, keep on doing innovations, but those innovations may not necessarily be the ones which are either market ready or demanded by the market. So at the end of the day, it only helps to do a good biodata which looks nice.
Yes, sir.
And it's also a fact that CSIR in as many years has got more than 6,000 patents which have not seen the light of the day. And today, if you are searching for any patent to write, you will search on nothing else but Google. And you do 5 searches on Google. By the time your patent is ready, somebody has already written it. That's why it is said that whenever you are in search of patents, do not search on Google. Use alternate library resources rather than the web search. Well, so those are the things, and I'm sure even the work which is done by the CRRI, Central Road Research Institute. My question was to him also. It was the same, that if it was not funded, if it was not led by the industry, then probably this innovation would not have seen the light of the day. It would not have gone to the market. Well, so problems remain, but yes, within that we have the solutions as well. I want to go back to Dr. Qureshi, as you also pointed out, Amitabh-ji, that when it comes to innovations to become universal, in the sense international, how to build national policies to draw on ideas and build practices, best practices, so that it does not develop in a vacuum. Case in point is the solar energy. We have put all our might behind it. We have had the Solar Alliance, we have had the Solar Institutes. There are subsidies attached with that. There are a whole lot of things, even with the new laws, whether it is in the RERA or in the construction industry. It is almost mandatory to have the solarization of the rooftops, so on and so forth. But it's still moving at a very, very slow pace. What possibly could be the reason for that? Is it the affordability? Is it the ROI? Or there is something missing in this innovation which probably is offered by the international players?
Dr. Gurdarshan, I think as far as solar industry is concerned, there is one set of people who are all for solar. As I am also from a renewable energy department, and I will say that we should push for solar, and we have committed in Paris Agreement that we have to meet the goals, and our Honorable Prime Minister has said that we will produce 175 gigawatts of power by 2022, and most likely we will achieve that. Given all these things, we must be cognizant of the problems of solar energy also. So solar energy is available only in the daytime. It is not there in the night time. We have to have energy storage for it. Storage is very costly. Now, you talked about the money which is required, the funding which is required. Now, there is always a trade-off between the funding which is required and the benefit which you will get out of it. So that is sustainable development. More what we put in now, probably we will be better off in the future. Now see, the developed countries, they have already had their phase of the polluting manufacturing industries much earlier, and we are going there only now. So in a sense, it is not a level playing field. I mean, we do not want to say that, okay, we have the right to pollute the world now, but we have to draw the lessons from whatever good things have happened in the world. But we also have to be cognizant of what is happening in our country, what are our requirements. Therefore, let us not single-handedly just log on to the bandwagon that we have to finish off all coal, we have to finish off this, because you see that is also not possible because we do not have the technology. Now, So funding is one thing, definitely. Funding for what? Now funding in renewable energy field is needed for a breakthrough in technology. If tomorrow we have a breakthrough in storage technology, then you see the problems will be solved. We can easily go to solar, because today, if I am putting 1 megawatt of solar, I am getting only 200 watts, 200 kilowatts, because of the 20% is the usable energy which we are getting out of it. So I think what we need to learn from the world is what challenges the other countries had faced before us and how we can better face them in terms of technological breakthroughs and in terms of viable financing models. And then we can showcase our successes, and then those successes can also be adopted by others. So a greater integration, I think the International Solar Alliance is doing a great work in this. They had recently showcased the solarization of India's health infrastructure in PHCs and CHCs, a lot of solar were put. So, that's a very good story which India had. So I would end by saying that instead of being too hung up on converting everything into solar, let us look at our unique problems and formulate our unique way and progress towards that goal, considering everything. Thank
That
you.
would be only realistic. Yes, I mean, I 100% agree with you, because going with the mad rush of converting everything and seeing that this is only going to
Yes.
be the answer. And the answer, it's actually no. This is going to supplement. This is
Yes.
not going to replace anything.
Exactly.
The sooner we accept it, the better it is, and accordingly, I understand, and I also have seen, at the grassroots level, the PHCs and the CHCs, how the solarization activities have taken place already, and India is in any way fortunate to have more months of sunshine rather than the cloud and the rains, and that is one big incentive for the solar industry to move further. But yes, the storage remains a big question mark, and we need to crack that soon. So hopefully that should also be done.
And Gurdarshan, before I would just seek 2 minutes of more of your time.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
So when we look at, as I said, that the Western countries, they have their own unique problems. The devil lies in the detail. So there is difference not only within countries, but within states. If we look at southern states, the load, and if you look at the northern states like Haryana, our peaks come in the morning and in the evening. So sometimes our 12,000 megawatt capacity, we are using only 2,000 megawatts of it. 10,000 is lying idle. That load curve is not there in South India. So we need to have different solutions in South India and different solutions in North India. Insolation is different, load curve is different. So only point I want to make is that no one solution fits all problem kind of a thing, but uniquely suited to everyone. We have to be that much flexible.
Correct. So that answers the third question, that innovations have to be, commensurate with the market conditions.
That's right.
Well, Satishji, I want to ask you this question that you have heard everyone speak, and moving further, what kind of innovations that India should be focusing on, because these have to be demanded by the market so that they are filling up a vacuum. Otherwise, the research will happen in a vacuum and will be of no good to anyone.
In this context, like particularly from the infrastructure, the impetus should be on the applied research. So if it is an applied research, then it will have the market acceptability, and once you will showcase your results, then the market will be ready to accept, since it has its own technical and commercial benefits. So the impetus should be on applied research, and in this direction we will proceed by as we have done in the case of steel slag research project. Then automatically the different steel industries approached us in order to get the solution, in order to get it converted their steel slag as a road making aggregate. So the major challenging tasks which were facing, like how to minimize the processing cost of the slag in aggregate form. So we have successfully developed the technology which we have demonstrated them, and subsequently when there is a processed aggregate, then it has been successfully utilized by the different road construction agencies like NHAI and NRRDA in different road projects. So once there is a success story, then automatically it start prompting to different road concessionaire which is doing major construction projects in National Highway Authority of India to utilize this but alternate aggregate in place of natural aggregate. So if we have the applied research like which has the market acceptability and its commercial and technical benefits, then it will automatically prompt the industry as well as to the government also to focus and to provide the requisite fund for that. So sometime it happened like the research is carried out in order to have the good number of research papers or uh, required to file the patent out of it, but the ground implementation remain very limited, and by virtue of that the quality research like will not be implemented at the ground level significantly. So if we can implement the ground research project effectively and showcase our technology to the different user agency, then automatically the funding and the commercialization aspect will be resolved.
I'm sure, that's the way out, and there is always light at the end of the tunnel. And I must say that compared to as innovations do take a long time, and compared to last 5 years where we were and where we are today, there has been a leapfrog, and I'm sure moving forward it is only going to accelerate further. Great. So we also have a technocrat with us, who's a PhD in physics and former Deputy Director General, National Informatics Center, Dr. Shefali Das, Distinguished Fellow, Scotch Development Foundation. Her areas of interest specialization are planning, implementation of management information systems and decision support systems, development of and implementation of e-governance programs, informatics development services, and setting up of computer centers, local area networks and computer communication infrastructure in rural areas. She has done it and seen it all. I would like to invite her for summing up as well as drawing recommendations from this panel. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Gulshanji. Actually, we have got a very good mix of panelists who have spoken in all fields, and all your three questions have been answered partially. I will not say fully, but still partially. That means it makes my job a little simpler. I add 2 or 3 points. So there is no point in emphasizing that innovation or out of thinking gives an edge to any business. That's a well-known fact. But the main point is when we have some certain innovative ideas, it may look good on paper or in the lab, but will it really work well in the industry? Can it be commercially exploited? That we don't know. So the way forward will be to start a very small group where these ideas can be tested, and then if it is successful and it's commercially viable, because nobody will fund you unless they are very sure that their return on investment is going to be high. So somebody has to prove that the scientist has done his job by getting the innovation, the innovative ideas there. Whether you patent it or not, that's a different story. But whether it will work on the field or not, that is something which has to be done. In fact, if you look at the IITs, they do have a full-fledged system where the innovative ideas which have been produced by the students and the faculty and the researchers, that system takes care of transferring to the industry. They have got an established system, but that happens only in the IIT. How many IITs are there in the country? Similarly, you go to the IIMs, they do have incubation centers when innovative ideas are taken up by the students and entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs, and with little bit of funding, they are testing it for 2 years, 1 year. They fund it so to see what the market is, whether it can be replicated commercially. Having just an innovation is not enough. It should also work in a commercial way. Then only you get funding. Say, I'll give some examples of. We recently during this pandemic, everybody says that necessity is the mother of invention. During this pandemic, there was a huge necessity of testing kiosks, and people were scared. How do they test? Whether they will get infected, the testing people, will they get infected? So ITI Berhampur, they came up with some kind of a kiosk, smart kiosk, but the people will be behind and just their hands will come up, they will have a hole for looking and the swab will be taken. But how many of them? Maybe 5 or 10 the students have done, the faculty have helped them, but it has not scaled up. Last 1 year, we could have used many of them, these kiosks, because everywhere there are testing labs, setting up tents and all, but they're not as safe as the smart kiosks, for example. Similarly, there are robo sanitizers, which can spray the whole bus or even the diagnostic centers to make it sanitized. But still, they're not in the market. These are still in the innovation stage. Or you look at the the Dehradun Cantonment Board. We heard Mr. Pandey talk about the waste material. They have used plastic waste and made them bricks, colorful bricks. And those bricks can be used not for really load bearing things, but when you are having a decorative boundary wall, that can be used. So in India, we don't have any dearth of innovative ideas, but who is going to fund them? So there has to be some kind of a system which will see the proof. The concept has to be proved, not that it is working, but because it is to check whether it is commercially viable or not. So that only after that we can think of getting funding from the industry. Government funding is not going to go a very long way. That can probably government can come in proving that it is commercially viable. So that is where we need to have policies. Having innovation is not sufficient. The transfer of technology to the industry and making it viable, that is where the policies can be made. That's all. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. It was, I'm sure, cherry on top and quite a interesting addition that you have made. If I may go back to each of the panelists to make one recommendation each, that will really add a whole lot of value to in concluding this panel discussion. So if I may ask Mr. Amitava to start with one recommendation that you would like to make.
My recommendation is that when you go for some innovation work, it should be affordable.
Dr. Qureshi?
I think we should increase the allocation for R&D and encourage a broad-based research. We should identify more people who can do research and increase allocation and funding for research.
Mr. Som, your thoughts?
I would suggest that every educational institution, the higher education institution, should encourage innovation and encourage students to try and do some innovation which will be useful to the public as part of their projects. Like BTech students do a project in the final year, the MTech students do a project in their last semester, and of course the PhD. Like the approach which has been taken by the IITs and IIMs, I think all institutions, all higher education institutions should encourage their students and professors to innovate and bring it to the market for the good of the public.
Excellent. Mr. Pandey?
National Innovation Fund shall be set up in public-private partnership mode, where the annually certain allocations shall be made by Government of India through budgetary support, along with the funding shall be carried out by the different industry under the CSR activity too.
Dr. Parvati, the last one.
It should be beneficial to the society. Thus.
Yes, that is the ultimate objective. It has to be beneficial. That means to say that it has to be targeted at the demand, not just the supply. So that's the moot point. You know, we may continue to add on a whole lot of innovations, but if they are no good to anyone, nobody is going to take it up. There's going to be no takers. That means there's going to be no market. There is going to be no scale. And as I said, you know, my biodata only will look good at the end of the day. Well, So these are quite a good amount of takeaways and the recommendations that have come out of this panel. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for sharing your thoughts and ideas, pouring your heart out. And I'm grateful to have interacted with you all. I wish we had maybe another hour or so to have carried on this discussion. It was very, very invigorating. Well, thank you so much.